This story is about the 2010 Philadelphia Flyers 2010 playoff run, a run referred to as one of the last great Flyers playoff runs. Before I get into the 2010 playoff run, let's rewind all the way back to the 2008 to 2009 Flyers season, a season of changes. During that season, the minor league affiliate Philadelphia Phantoms would have their final season at the Spectrum. Not only that, the Philadelphia Flyers would pay tribute to their old arena as they would play 2 preseason games at the Spectrum. A game against the Carolina Hurricanes and one against the Philadelphia Phantoms. The beginning of the 2008 to 2009 Flyers season had a rocky start, but later that season, the Philadelphia Flyers got into the playoffs, and their opponent was the Pittsburgh Penguins, a team that eliminated them in the 2008 Eastern Conference Finals. The Penguins had the momentum in the beginning, but the Flyers were able to force a Game 6 back in Philly. Game 6 looked good for the Flyers as they took it right to the Penguins until the third period. Dan Carcillo dropped the gloves with Max Talbot, a fight that should have never happened, especially since the Flyers had the lead. Carcillo gave Talbot a beating, but the fact Talbot dropped the gloves invigorated the Penguins, and the Penguins came back in the third and dealt the Flyers a devastating elimination. Many Flyers fans, me being one of them, were heartbroken, but this was only the beginning. In the summer of 2009, the Philadelphia Flyers organization's goal was to make the Philadelphia Flyers a better team, a team focused on success. In the offseason, the Flyers signed a no-nonsense defenseman named Chris Pronger, tough guy Ian Lapierre, Ollie Tollefson, and goaltenders Ray Emery and Brian Boucher. This would also be the rookie season of James Van Riemsdyk. Early in the season, the Flyers were on a roll, but around late November, the wheels started to fall off and the losses started to pile up. One of the main factors was injuries and a huge suspension of Dan Carcillo. John Stevens was let go, and a new coach by the name of Peter Laviolette, a coach with Stanley Cup experience. Even though the Flyers got a new coach, the struggles continued. The Flyers' struggles continued into December, but the Flyers found some success late in December despite the injury to goaltender Ray Emery. Because of the injury to Ray Emery, the Flyers called up Michael Leighton from the Adirondack Phantoms, and surprisingly, he played well, and it slowed down the struggles. Late in the season, the Flyers' goaltender Ray Emery made a brief return to the lineup, but ended re-aggravating his injury, and was out indefinitely. A couple of months later, things were starting to get better for the Flyers. Simon Gagne made his return to lineup and ended up scoring the game-winning goal against the New Jersey Devils at Prudential Center. Also, the Flyers got a huge win over the Chicago Blackhawks, as Chris Pronger scored a last-second goal in the third period, which would seal the victory for the Philadelphia Flyers. In April, the Flyers got a huge victory over the Detroit Red Wings, and it looked like the Flyers were on their way to the playoffs. But the Flyers still needed one more point, and 2 of the last games were 2 of the biggest games of the 2009 to 2010 season, and those 2 games were against the New York Rangers, a team led by one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, Henrik Lundqvist. If the Flyers wanted to make the playoffs, they would have to dig down deep. This Flyers team was ready to put it all on the line. The first game was at MSG, and the first game went to the Rangers, and it would come down to the final game of the season. This Flyers team dealt with a lot of adversity, and they had been through a lot, not just the team, but the fans as well. The game would take place at a packed Wachovia Center. The Flyers crowd was pumped, but also very nervous, with their fingers crossed hoping their boys can get it done. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend this game, but me and my family gathered around the TV to watch the biggest game of the season. I was really nervous and on edge that day. All I could think about was that game. The game started out very defensive until the New York Rangers struck first on the scoreboard, but the Flyers finally got the equalizer, and eventually the game went into overtime, and finally the moment of truth, the shootout. It was Boucher versus Lundqvist, and the crowd was on edge. Nervousness and excitement filled the arena on that Sunday afternoon in April. Danny Briere was up first in the shootout, and he didn't hesitate to put the puck into the back of the net. Next up, the Rangers sent out Erik Christensen, and he was denied by Boucher. Next up, the Flyers sent out Mike Richards, and he was denied by Lundqvist. Next up, the Rangers sent out P.A. Parento, and he tied the shootout. Next up for the Flyers was Claude Giroux, and he buried the puck into the back of the net, giving the Flyers the 2-1 lead in the shootout. It was down to the wire, and the crowd's confidence was restored, and Brian Boucher just needed one more save to get his team into the playoffs. Next up, the Rangers sent out Ollie Jokinian, and Brian absolutely robbed Ollie Jokinian, and the crowd erupted, and it was a celebration. A season of adversity and doubt turned into a miracle that day, and on TV, I saw a fan base really come together, because the Flyers are playoff bound. Me and my family were truly excited, and I asked and said, "Hey, Dad, how about them Flyers?" A couple of weeks later, the playoffs officially started, and the Flyers' first opponent was the New Jersey Devils, a team that eliminated the Flyers in the 1995 Eastern Conference Finals and in the 2000 Eastern Conference Finals. The last time the Flyers eliminated the Devils was in the 2004 Eastern Conference quarterfinals. In Game 1, the Flyers got the victory in Newark. In Game 2, it was a close game, but it was the Devils that got the victory, and the series was tied 1-1 going back to Philly. In Game 3, the Flyers got the victory with a clutch goal by Dan Carcillo in overtime. In Game 4, Flyers took a commanding 3-1 lead in the series going back to Newark. In Game 5, the Flyers came out swinging as the Flyers outplayed and outsmarted the New Jersey Devils. In that game, Ian Lapierre put his face on the line blocking a shot, and he left the ice with a concussion. The crowd went quiet, and there was concern and admiration for his sacrifice. The Flyers rallied around their teammate and ended up eliminating the New Jersey Devils from the playoffs for the first time since 2004. After eliminating the Devils, the Flyers' next opponent was a true favorite and a predicted team to win the Stanley Cup, and that team was the Boston Bruins. Game 1 was an offensive showcase that ended up going into overtime, and it was the Bruins that took Game 1. Game 2 was also taken by the Bruins, and they had a 2-0 series lead going into Game 3 back in Philly. In Game 3, the Philly crowd was pumped up, and the Rocky theme was playing, and Lauren Hart and Kate Smith serenaded the crowd with the sound of God Bless America. The Flyers got off to a good start as Aaron Asham got the first goal. Unfortunately, the Bruins completely took over despite the injury to David Krejci, as the Bruins took a commanding 3-0 lead. It was looking like the Bruins had all the confidence in the world. I could already hear people saying there's always next year, but I ignored all of that because I know this team wasn't going to give up. In Game 4, Flyers were focused, determined, and full of Philly pride. Game 4 was a battle. The Bruins wanted to end it, but it was the Flyers that got the victory in overtime as a returning Simon Gagne scored the game-winning goal, and the Flyers put a dent in the Bruins' series lead going into Boston with another must-win game. In Game 5, the Bruins really wanted to end this series in front of their fans, but the Flyers had other plans. The Flyers got off to a solid start, outscoring the Bruins. Even though they were winning, Brian Boucher ended up leaving the game due to injury, and Michael Layton came in, and the Flyers shut out the Bruins in Game 5 going back to Philly, and the Bruins were looking like they underestimated the Flyers, and the series was 3-2. In Game 6, it was another battle, but it was the Flyers that prevailed, tying up the series 3-3 going back to Boston. On the day of Game 7, I woke up with a headache, and ironically, I went to my annual checkup, and after that I went home and I thought everything was fine, but my dad got a call from the doctor saying that my potassium was extremely high and that I should go to the emergency room. I was really frustrated about that, and I also thought this was a bad omen and that I would miss the game, but luckily, I was able to watch the game in the hospital room. Game 7 officially began, and it was do or die for the Flyers and the Bruins. The Bruins were desperate to end the series and advance to the next round, and the Flyers just wanted to prove the doubters wrong. Game 7 did not start out well. The Flyers were outscored 3-0 in the first period. Coach Peter Laviolette told his team that it takes only one goal and the rest will follow, and the Flyers got the message loud and clear. With 17 minutes 12 seconds in the first period, JVR got the Flyers on the board. In the second period, Scott Hartnell made it a one-goal game at 2-49. At 8:39, Danny Briere tied the score at 3-3, and the crowd at the watch party back in Philly erupted with excitement, and the Bruins crowd went completely silent, and I myself was excited even though I was in the emergency room. At 12:52 in the third period, it was Simon Gagne that gave the Flyers the 4-3 lead, and the crowd at the watch party back in Philly erupted in excitement once again. When the Flyers got the lead, I was screaming with excitement, not just me, but also my dad who was there with me. I recall my heart rate monitor beeping because I was so excited that the Flyers made the epic comeback. After taking a 4-3 lead, the Flyers were able to hang on and advance to the 2010 Eastern Conference Finals. I also was feeling better, and I was able to go home. I was really tired, but it was worth it because the Flyers made history that night, coming back from 3-0 deficit in the series and advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. I couldn't believe if this was real. The next morning, I thought it was all a dream, but this was reality, and it was spectacular. After waking up that day, I remember stopping by my local deli, and when I got there, there was a sound of excitement. Of all the years of being a Flyers fan, I have never experienced something like this since 1997. I also remember going to a party at my cousin's house, and my whole family and my relatives were excited for the Flyers and excited for the next round. A couple of days later, the Eastern Conference Finals officially began as the Flyers dominated the Montreal Canadiens in the first two games, taking a 2-0 lead in the series. In Game 3, the Canadiens got the best of the Flyers. However, the Flyers left their calling card, letting the Canadiens know that this is our dream and you're just in a way. Montreal got the first win in the series as they got the victory in their arena. In Game 4, the Flyers were determined and ready to get some payback, as the Flyers defeated the Canadiens in Montreal, going back to Philly up 3-1 in the series. The Flyers just needed one more win to advance to the Stanley Cup Finals. A week later, Game 5 officially began. In the first period, the Canadiens got on the board first at 59 seconds in the first period. At 4:25 in the first period, Mike Richards was on a breakaway, and Halak came out of his net and fell down after colliding into Richards. It was Mike Richards that capitalized and scored the tying goal. At 307, Asham gave the Flyers the lead at 2-1, and then at 4:31 in the second, Jeff Carter increased the lead at 3-1. At 6:53, Scott Gomez made it a one-goal game. Late in the third period, the Canadiens pulled their goalie, but it was Jeff Carter that scored the empty net goal, giving the Flyers the 4-2 lead. Eventually, the final horn sounded, and the Flyers became 2010 Eastern Conference champions. I couldn't believe it, and it was excited for the Stanley Cup Finals, and the whole city was in an excited frenzy. Weeks later, the Flyers' opponent in the Stanley Cup Finals would be Patrick Kane and the Chicago Blackhawks. On the day of Game 1, the city of Philadelphia was ready and fired up. In Game 1 in Chicago, the Blackhawks won 6-5, and they also took Game 2 in Chicago 2-1. The series went back to Philly for Games 3 and Games 4. In Game 3, it was the Flyers that got the victory, as Claude Giroux scored in overtime. In Game 4, the Flyers tied the series 2-2 with a 5-3 win, as the series went back to Chicago for Game 5. In Game 5, the Flyers fell to the Blackhawks 7-4, going back to Philly for Game 6. The Flyers forced overtime, but it was the Blackhawks that ended up hoisting the Stanley Cup. The crowd went quiet in Philly. As for me, I went to bed that night feeling disappointed. The next morning, I realized that after everything this team went through, getting into the playoffs by winning the last game of the season, beating the Devils in 5 games, coming from behind to beat the Bruins in 7 games, beating the Canadiens in 5 games to become conference champions, it all made me realize that it was a damn good run, an admirable run, a run to remember, and I was truly proud of my team and proud of the effort. In the following season, the Flyers tried to replicate what they did last year, but were swept by the Bruins, and years later the Flyers made the playoffs in 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2020. 2020 would be the Flyers' last playoff appearance. To be honest, 2010 was an epic playoff season. If you were to ask Flyers fans what their favorite Flyers moment was, a lot of people from this generation would say the 2010 playoff run.